Hello, I would like to welcome you all. Thank you so much for coming. And on behalf of my colleagues in German Studies, um, um, welcome to this presentation by Barbara Beisinghoff. The occasion for Barbara's talk this evening is an exhibit, and I think some of you may have seen it already in the main library. It's an exhibit entitled Visions of Wonder, illustrating Grimm's tales over 2 centuries. And the exhibit is currently on view, if you haven't seen it, right next door in the main library. Um, so this exhibit was curated, co-curated by a class of mine. My name is Elliot Schreiber, by the way. I teach in the German Studies. So my students last semester in a course, German Studies 235, Global 19th Century Studies 235, a course entitled Grimm's Tales and Their Adaptations, had the pleasure of working together with Ron Patkus, who's here this evening from Special Collections, and myself in curating this exhibit. When you walk into the exhibit, you'll see on the left-hand side a very rare copy of the second edition of Grimm's Tales from 1819, with the first illustration of one of their stories. And the illustration was by their brother. Their brother's name was Ludwig Emil Grimm. And on the right-hand side, as you walk into the exhibit, you'll find Barbara's exquisite artist book that's an intimate conversation with one of the Grimm's tales, The Six Swans, as well as a tale by Hans Christian Andersen. So the 1819 book by the Brothers Grimm and the 2001 book, artist book by Barbara Beisinghoff, they kind of bookend the exhibit. Like all the other illustrated works in the exhibit, they're drawn from Vassar's magnificent archives and special collections. And I'd like to thank, once again, Ron Patkus, sitting right up here. Thank you, Ron, for so closely collaborating with the students on the exhibit, and also for helping to make possible Barbara's visit to Vassar in a very big way. I'd also like to thank Vassar's Global 19th Century Studies program for co-sponsoring this evening's talk, and a couple other people I want to thank. Sam Schneider, who you see right over here, he doesn't want to be seen, but we should acknowledge him because he's helping Barbara with the presentation and has been working with Barbara over the last couple of days preparing for the presentation. Thank you, Sam. Our German language fellow, Alena, Kilistan. Okay. Thank you so much for your help as well, and to Cassie as well. Thank you so much, Cassie, for your help with the reception. There is a small reception right after the presentation this evening. Things arranged behind you. I should note there are some original works of art and artist books up here. So just try to keep any snacks and any beverages on that side of the room and not up here, especially this table right here beside me. But also there's I think a book from Special Collections right on the other table. So just be very, very careful. Okay. One other thing I should mention, there is a restroom down the hall. If you go out these double doors and make a left down the main hall on the left-hand side, the second door on the left. There are also restrooms downstairs in the basement. Okay. I'd recommend the one upstairs. I also wanted to thank our office specialist, Lisa Scott-Mack, who's been doing really so much work behind the scenes to make this event possible. And there was something else you wanted me to mention. Oh, for the exhibit, if you want a sneak peek, if you haven't seen the exhibit yet, there are brochures up here on the table furthest from me. Feel free to take a picture. Okay. They're beautiful brochures, beautifully designed brochures. And so now I'm going to hand things over to my colleague, Silke von der Emde, who's a professor in German Studies and chair of recruitment, who will in turn introduce or reintroduce Barbara Beisinghoff.
It's such a pleasure for me to introduce our good friend Barbara Beisinghoff to you, and this is Barbara's 4th visit to Vassar, and every time she comes, she brings new surprises and deep inspiration. Barbara is a wonderful, versatile artist who creates beautiful artist books, large etchings, experimental paperworks, as well as large public art installations. Barbara's art is about Durchdringung, and she asked me to say that, which means something like penetration or entering a material or a topic fully. It's really the opposite of surface treatment or superficiality. When you see some of her art here on the table or in her slides in a little while, you see how she literally digs into copper surfaces of sculptures or her printing plates, or enters a beautifully scooped paper by means of a water jet, or by sewing objects into the screen with which she scoops the paper, which leaves openings in the paper itself. She constructs paper towers with her artworks, which she can enter, and she constructs star arcs made of perforated copper over paths, like the one she did for her public garden in Germany, and another one in China. She has children immortalized themselves in deeply etched reliefs, which are set into the pavements of city squares. Barbara has exhibited in shows and museums all over the world, and I have way too much to mention. I just mentioned just a couple, such as the National Museum in Krakow, the Library of Congress, the Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C., and a few years ago, here in New York City, at the International Print Center. She has also given her estate pre-mortem, a donation to the State Library of Berlin. So they're all her works. You are in for a true treat today with Barbara's talk, What the Grimm's Fairy Tales Tell Us About Resistance and Survival. With her beautiful artist book in the exhibition, Barbara will demonstrate to us today how she reads the tales and the Grimm's life and circumstances as an artist. You will see that not only in the beautiful slideshow that she created, which contains all of her original art, but also in the way she reads the tales and organizes the talk itself. In this way, the Grimm's tales, as well as the theme of resistance, gets a whole new dimension, or better dimensions, that are different than what we usually get here at Vassar from German study scholars or from historians. So please help me welcome our guest, Barbara Beisinghoff.
So first, I thank you, Ron, that you made it possible that I come here. Elliot, for all the organization, and Silke, thank you so much. And I thank you for coming. I see so many friends. I'm very happy that you came. I'm sorry I can't speak free because of the language. What Grimm's fairy tales tell us about resistance and survival. Grimm's fairy tales reflect the best and worst in us. Their magic mirror takes a look at desires and fears and can help us better understand how we can resist or even outsmart power abuses. The Grimm survival stories have influenced me at turning points in my life and led me to the creation of some of my artist books. Please follow me first along the life path of Jakob Grimm and Wilhelm Grimm, who took care of every little word phrase and verse, and preserved the tales for us. At the suggestion of the Romanticists Clemens Brentano and Achim von Arnim, who had collected folk songs under the title The Boy's Magic Horn, the Grimms began collecting and writing down folk tales. One of the most important oral sources for their children's and household tales was the Viehmännin, stylized by the brothers Grimm as their fairy tale woman, Dorothea Viehmann. She grew up in a tavern called Knallhütte in Baunatal, near Kassel. She had heard her stories from carters, farmers, and soldiers of the passing armies of the 7 Years' War. 40 fairy tales come from her. The Grimms characterized her as a true Hessian farmer's wife. At the same time, she was a descendant of the Huguenot family Pierson. Many Huguenots, religious refugees from France, had found refuge in Kassel. Wilhelm's wife, Dortchen, too, came from a Huguenot family. With the Huguenots came some of Charles Perrault's fairy tales, such as Little Red Riding Hood and Cinderella, into the children's household tales. The Fisherman and his Wife was given to the brothers by Philipp Otto Runge, and it is known all over Estonia, Hungary, and Russia. Fisherman, fisherman, you have caught enough, lots and lots of tasty fishes. If you set me free, I grant you some wishes. In the slideshow, you see the designation KHM and a number. This means Kinder- und Hausmärchen, or children's and household tales. They are numbered because the translations into other languages are otherwise hard to find. Brothers Grimm folk tales have traveled far and wide, as you see. The first edition in 1812 still included comments and fragments which were intended to encourage the reader to play an active part in the collection. It contained few illustrations, but many references to sources. Readers wanted more pictures and less cruelty and eroticism. They wanted stories suitable for young people. Thanks to Wilhelm's smooth pen, the tales were made more kid-friendly. The small edition, illustrated by Jakob and Wilhelm's younger brother Ludwig Emil, was published in 1825 and brought the brothers world renown. The brothers Grimm had collected the fairy tales at the last moment. Eliot asked, why was it the last moment? Because the industrialization began to change not only life, but the language. Cultural struggle. Napoleon Bonaparte had installed his brother Jérôme Bonaparte as king in 1807 in Kassel, in the Saberburg, where the fairy tale Sleeping Beauty is set. The crates containing Rembrandt's paintings were hidden from the French conquerors. The hiding place was betrayed. The paintings were taken to the Louvre in Paris. Jakob Grimm accompanied the Allied armies in Paris in 1814 in order to recover the stolen cultural treasures for Hesse-Kassel. From 1814 to 1815, Jakob Grimm served as a member of the delegation from Hesse-Kassel at the Congress in Vienna, where a new European order was discussed. French was spoken among the nobility and the bourgeoisie, not only in the German-speaking principalities, duchies, city-states and kingdoms, the whole of Europe, including Russia, stood in the shadow of the Western French neighbor. Besides the children's and household tales, the Grimms wrote, among others, the German dictionary and the German grammar. Their linguistic research contributed to the awareness of a common language and culture, to unity, justice, and freedom. In 1837, both brothers belonged to the 7 Göttingen professors, who were dismissed because they had opposed the arbitrary suspension of the constitution by the King of Hanover. Ernst August repealed the liberal constitution 1833, which limited the power of the monarch through rights of an assembly of estates. The Göttingen 7 called for independent thinking. They saw that academic freedom was at stake and drafted a letter criticizing the king's action as unlawful. Ernst August's answer, professors, dancers, and prostitutes can be found anywhere for money. Jakob Grimm, Friedrich Dahlmann, and Georg Gottfried Gervinus had to leave the kingdom within 72 hours. After the judgment had become known, the streets were flooded with students. A state of siege was imposed. The students were not allowed to attend lectures. The professors were not allowed to give lectures. Hundreds of students marched to the Hanover state border in December 1837 in freezing cold weather to escort their professors. The protests spread throughout the German Federation and promoted liberal thinking. Jakob moved to Kassel to live with one of the younger Grimm brothers. Wilhelm organized an orderly relocation in 1838 with his family and the huge library. 1839, the Grimms began researching for the German Wordbook, or the Deutsches Wörterbuch. The Grimms' fame was so great, and their intelligent acquaintances who helped them with their research so numerous, that soon a veritable blizzard of notes like snowflakes flew into their office. 16,000 notes arrived in the early years for the German Wordbook. It is arranged alphabetically, sorted by part of speech, verb, noun, adjective, preposition, and conjunction. Therefore, my lecture is also organized alphabetically. After the brothers had plunged into the flood of words for 21, respectively 25 years, only the beginning had been made. It was not completed until 1961. May 1848 until May 1849, the members of the first all-German parliament gathered to discuss a liberal constitution and the formation of a German nation-state. Jakob was among the deputies in Frankfurt. Although Jakob's motion on Article 1 of the Basic Rights was rejected, it remains as relevant today as ever. The German people are a free people, and German soil does not tolerate servitude. It sets free any foreigners who are not free and who reside on it. Everyday things play a magic role in the fairy tales. Everyday items embody anger, fear, and joy in my artwork. Watermarks as translucent windows in the paper from a zone between visible and invisible. An impression in the mind becomes an imprint in paper. Textures caused by copper flakes on the surface of the etching tray are transformed into traces, which amaze the viewers since they can't explain the process of creation. In English, you very often say a body of work. I am concerned about material. The body of my artist book, The Wild Swans, consists of stinging nettle fiber, which is tear resistant, and this is already an important part of the story. The sister sewed nettle shirts for the brothers. Her painstaking work with burning fibers during 6 years of imposed silence is an act of resistance. At the dramatic end, when she's already standing on the pyre and is bound fast to the stake, with the fire licking at her clothes with its red tongue, the 6 years of silence are up. The swans rushed in. She throws the nettle shirts over them. Her brothers are freed from the curse and stand around her in human form. But she has not managed to finish the sleeve of the shirt for the youngest brother. That's why he has one wing for the rest of his life instead of an arm. Form and freedom. Text collage of two survival stories, Grimm's The Six Swans and Andersen's literary fairy tale of the Wild Swans. Andersen's story is detailed and poetic. Grimm's version is short. I printed them in different colors. What I did not know until my research for this lecture, that Andersen had visited Jakob Grimm in Berlin. I came to Grimm without a letter of recommendation. Grimm did not know me. He had never heard my name, knew nothing about me at all. Who are you? Jakob Grimm had asked the visitor. I'm Andersen. The fact that Grimm did not know me, he wrote that in a biography, upset me so much that when people talked about how well I had been received in Berlin, I shook my head doubtfully and said, but Grimm did not know me. Haurire et creare. The combination of craftsmanship and artwork and the sensual and the spirit of the sensual and the spiritual characterizes Beisinghoff's body of art and the specific process of creation. It's Anne Bohnenkamp-Renken from the Goethe Museum in Frankfurt who says that the word create contains both meanings. Haurire, Latin, to scoop out a liquid, and creare, Latin, to create. Goethe plays with this connection in a famous poem from the West Eastern Divan. The poet's pure hand scoops. Water will ball up. Wasser wird sich ballen. These verses come from the poem Song and Creation in the Book of the Singer. They combine the idea of the concrete, tangible activity of scooping water with that of the creative artist, who is thought of as an analogous to the creator God. Goethe took this image of the boiling up water as a metaphor for the improbable process of creating a successful work of art from an old Indian legend. Intense search and many embodiments of the singing, springing lark, a prince at night, and a lion during the day. And as a ray of light touches the room of the heroine, he is transformed into a dove. The bride wanders to the Red Sea and overcomes numerous obstacles to get her husband back. In addition to my artist book, I built installations of my translucent watermarked images in counterlight, a staircase to the moon, a staircase to the sun, and a third staircase to the night wind, because they had given her important presents. And one of my daughters participated in a performance entitled Seven Feathers, Seven Steps. In my artist book here on my table, that one with a pointed roof, that book is called Living in Copperplate Engravings, after a text by Gaston Bachelard in his Poetics of Space. He says, words I often imagine are small houses with a cellar and an attic. Descending into the cellar means dreaming, losing oneself in distant corridors of an uncertain mythology. Searching for treasures that remain hidden in words. But in this special artist's books, inconceivable nightmares lie buried in the earth, and I can tell you afterwards when you show it. Intelligence. One fine morning, the long-legged hare makes fun of the hedgehog's crooked short legs, whereupon the hedgehog challenged him for a race. When the race in the field begins, the hedgehog only runs a few steps, but at the end of the furrow, he has placed his wife, who looks like him. When the hare, certain of victory, storms in, the hedgehog's wife rises and calls out to him, I'm already here. And they shout again and again at the end of each row, and they win the race. Living together in one room from morning to night throughout their lives greatly benefited the Grimm's brothers' tremendous life's work. Seeing with 4 eyes, hearing with 4 ears, having 2 brains focused on the same thing. They were collectors of something as countless as the sand of the sea and the stars in the sky. Words, and not only the language of their present, but stretching far into the past and far beyond national borders. That giant language family known by the term Indo-European. The brothers were one company, one research enterprise. There was a moment in their lives when they said, I do, and they managed to ensure that marriage to one person did not end their connection to the other, but rather strengthened it. With this I do that Wilhelm Grimm gave to his daughter a marriage of 3 began, which can undoubtedly be counted among the most astonishing masterpieces of the art of living. Martin Mosebach. Love. A poor peasant who was in prison cried, oh, if I had but listened to my daughter. This was overheard by the king, who said, if you have a daughter who is as wise as that, let her come here. She came, and the king said, come to me not clothed, not naked, not riding, not walking, not in the road, and not out of the road. And if thou canst do that, I will marry thee. She put off everything she had on. Then she was not clothed, and took a great fishing net, and seated herself in it, and wrapped it entirely round and round her, so that she was not naked. She hired an ass, and tied the fisherman's net to its tail, so that it was forced to drag her along, and that was neither riding nor walking. She had guessed the riddle and became queen. But one day the king said, I will not have thee any longer. go back home. One favor he granted her. She might take with her the one thing that was dearest in her eyes. She ordered a sleeping draught, which he drank. He fell into a deep sleep. The servant was forced to carry the king to her little home. She laid him in her little bed, and when he awoke, he said, "Where am I?" The wife said, "You told me I might bring away with me that which was dearest in my eyes. I have nothing dearer than yourself, so I have brought you with me." The king said, "Dear wife, thou shalt be mine, and I will be thine." And he took her back with him to the palace. Lumpensammler, rag collector, hunchback little man, and angel of history, Walter Benjamin. Fairy tales tell us in the form of the youngest brother how its chances grow with the distance from mythical primeval times. It shows up in the form of the one who set out to learn fear, that the things we fear are transparent. It shows us in the form of the animals that come to the aid of the fairy tale child, that nature is not only beholden to myth, but much preferred to gather around humans. The most advisable thing as fairy tales taught humanity long ago, and as they still teach children today, is to confront the forces of the mythical world with wit and cleverness. The OED, Oxford English Dictionary. When work on the German dictionary began in Berlin, 1839, James Murray, who later became the author of the OED, had only just been born, 1837. He grew up in Scotland, and his favorite children's book was Grimm's Fairy Tales. Murray had a scriptorium built in his back garden, with storage space for the ever-increasing number of paper slips with words being sent to Murray and his team. Anything addressed to Mr. Murray Oxford would always find its way to him. And such was the volume of mail sent to Murray that the post office erected a special post box outside the garden. Compared to the Grimms, who kept warm in their Berlin apartment, James Murray, his 11 children, and his colleagues had to freeze sitting in the scriptorium in the publisher's garden, their feet tucked into boxes lined with insulating newspaper to keep out the bitter cold. Murray died in 1915. The OED was published 1928. This edition of 13 volumes, including the supplement, was subsequently reprinted 1961 and 1970. Once upon a time, there was a king and a queen. Means once upon a time there was a father and a mother. Sigmund Freud said that. Once upon a time, and they all lived happily until their death. These introductory and concluding sentences are memorable. Rhythm, wording, and verses create timelessness. Memorable are repetitions and spells. Dear huntsman, do but let me live. 2 little ones to thee I'll give. Fairy tale, The Two Brothers. And in Jorinde and Joringel, they lived happily together forever after. Thus, no religious or legal legitimation is required to live together happily. Quinces resist, because they are difficult to cut. They glow yellow beneath the hairy surface, and they are self-sufficient. They do not need a partner. They pollinate themselves. Wilhelm's wife was a good cook. She collected her recipes in her book of art and miracles. It's not such a big leap from the stove to the literature of her husband and brother-in-law. Under a quince jelly recipe, she notes from Lisette, recipes are nothing more than memories at one's own history as well as of an entire culture. Resist. Bruno Bettelheim was arrested 1938 by the Gestapo as a Jew. He was interned in the Buchenwald concentration camp. Released 1939 and allowed to emigrate to the United States thanks to the efforts of Eleanor Roosevelt. Despite all the cruelty, Bettelheim considered fairy tales valuable because they always had a happy ending. Fairy tales deal with universal human problems. Through the good and evil characters, they address all levels of the human personality simultaneously. By pondering, reimagining, and fantasizing about fairy tales, children transform unconscious content into conscious fantasies. Fairy tales have multiple layers of meaning. Only the child knows which meaning is important to them at that moment. Riddle tale. A princess caused it to be proclaimed that she would only marry somebody who could conceal himself from her so effectively that she could not find him. 3 brothers appeared. She saw the oldest hiding in the egg on which the raven broods, and the second brother in the stomach of the fish in the sea. The youngest brother changed into a sea hare. The fox, disguised as a merchant, went to town and sold the sea hare to the king's daughter. When the king's daughter went to the 12 windows, the sea hare crept under her braids of her hair. The princess looked through every window and did not see him. Then she felt him under her braids. She seized it and threw it on the ground, exclaiming, "Away with thee, get out of my sight." It ran to the merchant. Both hurried to the spring, into which they plunged and regained their true forms. The youth ran straight to the palace, and the wedding was held. Root. The direction of fairy tales goes deeper, always towards the bottom, more earthly, closer to the root of things, into the essence. Sex. In the older editions, Rapunzel complains to Mother Gothel after repeated visits from her prince. "You will be much harder for me to bring up than the young prince. Tell me, why are my little clothes becoming too tight? My little dresses don't fit me anymore." This was censored by Wilhelm in later versions as unsuitable for minors. Young women have children but never get pregnant. Thousand Furs is an example of female resistance. She decides to leave her father because she recognizes the immorality of his desire. She takes ball gowns in a nutshell with her, and also a garment that contains the fur of every animal in the country. She's farsighted in her planning. Her perseverance and strategies are ultimately successful. The male antagonists of the miller's daughter in Rumpelstilzchen put her in hopeless situations without helping her in any way. Her father lies about her abilities. The king is only interested in her gold spinning, which increases his fortune. Rumpelstilzchen demands her firstborn child, and the child's father does not stand by her side during the great threat. A queer reading of the character of Rumpelstilzchen illuminates its non-binary gender. It belongs to the marginalized population, pushed aside by heteronormative society. It is neither male nor female, but a person who is persecuted. Solace. Fairy tales not only open up abysses, but also convey the certainty that they can be bridged, jumped over, overcome, and that is comforting and helps to survive. Time. The fairy tale is not just the golden cage that embellishes a confined reality. It is also the bird that breaks out of its cage. It soars into freedom of fantasy and flouts all meaning. And that too is part of the meaning of fairy tales. And what you see here is the plane tree in the middle of the library lawn in Vassar. And I did a project with the help of Circle and the German department with words of Paul Celan couched on the trunk of the tree. And as time passes, the paper words fell down. Unconsciousness. In the film The Zone of Interest by Jonathan Glaser, 2023. After the novel by Martin Hermis, there is a satirical response to Hannah Arendt's question about the banality of evil. The father, Rudolf Höss, the commander of Auschwitz, reads a fairy tale to his sleepless daughter at bedtime. A dream sequence is inserted. A mysterious figure can be seen hiding fruit for the prisoners at the sites of forced labor. Hannah Arendt speaks about Zivilisationsbruch, break of civilization. Violence. During the Nazi era, the grim fairy tales were misused in the spirit of National Socialism. After the Second World War, 1945, the Allies came up with the idea of banning the fairy tales. The censorship lasted from 1945 to 1949. On the flip side, Hannah Arendt writes in her book, The Origins of Totalitarianism, that the blind obedience of the Germans, who followed orders with the pedantry of bureaucrats, had made the National Socialists' reign of terror possible. Wild forests as a symbol for breaking free from society's rules. In a wild forest that nobody dared to enter, at the bottom of the lake lies Iron John, covered in rust all over the body. I drew inspiration for images of Iron John as I developed my etchings from copper plates in etching solution containing iron 3 chloride. Wishes come true in fairy tales. It is part of human evolution that wishes constantly dig tunnels below, above, or to the side of so-called facts. They are partisans. They must also exist in our world. It would be interesting to dig deep in the spirit of the Brothers Grimm, to listen and collect what exists today in place of fairy tales. It will not take the form of fairy tales, but there must be stories in which wishes come true and which are spun out as wandering tales. Alexander Kluge, who just died some days ago. The wishing table, the gold S, and the cudgel in the sack. I think nothing would be golden on our actual wishing table. There would be no crown and no ballroom, but freedom of speech instead. What do you see in the fairy tale mirror? Our problem is that the worst among us cannot recognize themselves in the stories. It's about broadening our own perspective. Think for yourself. Think without guardrails, suggests Hannah Arendt. Let us look closely and together find the right questions and answers. The future cannot be designed and manufactured. Rather, it emerged from what we are currently developing together.
Thanks so much, Barbara, for that incredibly inspiring and enriching talk. We have time for questions and conversation. And if you would like, we can try to do it without the microphone, but if anybody wants to come up and use the microphone so that they can be fully heard, you're welcome to do that as well. Yeah, why don't we turn on the light? Any questions, comments, observations? Barbara, maybe I'll be so bold and ask a first question and maybe just get the ball rolling. I thought it was wonderful that you left off X, Y, and Z. Was that your original plan, or was that something that sort of how did that develop? Do you want to come up and?
I don't think I understand the question.
Okay, I'll repeat the question.
With the alphabet
Yes.
order, or it appeared. I just came like this. Because of their, because they took care of us. Silke, I saw in the television, he does not care. I don't say the name. He does not care. And but they took care of every little girl.
Yes, go ahead.
This might have been said, but over how many years were they collecting these stories?
18, probably, 10 or so, they might have begun collecting, maybe a little bit earlier.
I wrote it. You mean the fairy tales or the birds?
The fairy tales.
The fairy tales, I said exactly. It was Achim von Arnim and Clemens Brentano were the inspirators, and I give you
The range.
I can tell you afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Barbara, thank you. That was really fascinating and beautiful. Can you tell us, first of all, as a child, did you have a favorite Grimm's fairy tale? And then my second question is, when did you start putting that in your art?
I had no children's book. My parents were refugees. My father comes from Silesia, which is now Poland, and my mother comes from Berlin, and they were teachers in what is now Lithuania, in Memel, which is now Klaipeda, and then I grew up exactly between Hamburg and Hanover on a farm. And when I had to go to school, they moved to Hanover, where my father was a teacher. But I had the first fairy tale. It is very bad paper, and it is nearly yellow and falls apart. But one of my grandchildren will inherit it because I told them stories from this very ugly book, and I must have got it when I was around 4 or 5. And the second question?
When did you start using the fairy tales in your art? When did that merge?
It was this story with the white swans. And then I made another big effort with a singing springing lark, which is really fascinating. It's so old. It comes from the Greek myth. Apuleius had the same text. And it is, at day he is a lion, and at night he is a wonderful prince. And and the long, long journey to find the husband again, that somehow touched me and did not end to touch me or to push me, and therefore I made it.
I was amazed by the wonderful confluence of Vassar and Hannah Arendt and Roosevelt and Freud, and it raises the resonance also of the philology that was inspiring you, so that where do you see the line between illustration, like showing the picture, and this psychological response that really transcends the story?
I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a research person. It is mostly the paper or some imprints which pushes me further, and then come and the figures only. I'm not as Tanya. I can't do these big figures. I only can have small figures. They just arise. But you talked about the Bachelard, right? And it's a wonderful book, and I have it in here, but I can try to say it in some sentences. Every word would be a house. In the ground floor would be the gesunder Menschenverstand.
Common
sense.
And in the cellar would be the dreams. In the upper stories would be abstraction. What me interested most was the cellar, to go down, because many artists, they, from unconsciousness, you have inspiration, or you, but then someone came from Berlin, and she told me about a synagogue, which is in Babin Yar, and a young architect, Manuel Herz, he said, I can build you what you want. I can build you a synagogue as a memorial, but I don't give it a cellar. A cellar is impossible, because the ground is, there are all the dead, murdered people. Therefore, I had already been in the middle of the book, and but then I decided there is no cellar, no inspiration from under, but I can have a roof. And so I made this roof, and I then got to know philosopher from Berlin, Shulamit Bruckstein, and she gave me a Jewish prayer, because I felt it must be something very solacing, or and I wrote it with a cyanotypy and with etching. So that's the story about that book of Bachelard.
As a child, my British aunt sent me a book called The Lady of the Linden Tree. And The Lady of the Linden Tree had in it a story called Clever Manka. And Clever Manka, appeared in a story very similar to the one that today, but instead of, so she came neither by night nor by day, but that, that was twilight. And neither riding nor walking with one leg over a goat, and neither dressed nor undressed with a similar thing that those three things had been done, and she wrote in at twilight, she got the king. And I like this resolution better, that she held the king off, that he woke up in a hut, or her place. So I just offer the Lady of the Living Tree, as which, had clever manka, so I've always thought of this story as clever manka. And, so there's all of these little, sort of different endings to it, that are out there. I sort of am loath to give up my clever manka. I did like your ending better.
And I thank you very much.
Oh,
And
thank
these
you very much.
concerts-
Thank you. There's still some refreshments and a couple more on the way. Thank you so much for coming out on this lovely spring evening, and stay a while and chat a bit.